A Thursday that's pretty significant. The House passed the Senate's budget. We're going to talk about that today. We're going to catch up on all the latest news from the White House. But I want to begin today with United States Senator John Cornyn of the great state of Texas. Senator, good to see you. Welcome. Always a friend of the program. Senator, before you say a word, I want to say I was stunned yesterday when you drew a primary challenge from Attorney General Paxton. No offense to the AG. I've known him a long time. You're our guy in the Senate. I think every conservative and every center right to the most MAGA person is going to support you. Are you surprised? And by the way, I'm endorsing to what extent that matters to anyone in Texas. But are you surprised to draw a primary challenge?
Well, I've always had primaries, Hugh. I am a little surprised that someone would try to mislead the voters about my record. I'm very proud of my record supporting President Trump 92% of the time in his first term, responsible for helping him get the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act passed, confirming more than 200 federal judges, including 3 Supreme Court justices. And I've been proud to support the president's nominees for confirmation now in his second term. So unfortunately, there are those who are looking for opportunities, and they're going to twist the facts and maybe even abuse the facts to try to gain some advantage. But I'm ready to go. I've done it before and successfully. But thanks for your support.
Well, I'm glad to give it because I think you've done a fabulous job for President Trump, for every Republican on every issue. You've been in and out of leadership. You're a senior on judiciary, senior on finance. People of Texas would be nuts to say, we want a rookie going up to the Senate, because seniority may be the most important thing in the Senate. It's an unusual body, but it matters.
Well, I have the scars to prove it, and been through a lot of battles over the years, and proud of my state and proud to represent 31 million Texans in the U.S. Senate. And I'm also proud of the fact my team, and it is a team effort, has been ranked the most effective Republican Senate office for a number of years. So when people need to get something done, we're there to help them get it done, and particularly for the folks I represent back home in Texas.
I want to remind the audience of one other thing. I believe Senator Cornyn is the only former state Supreme Court justice who serves in the Senate, which has mattered a lot when people like Justice Kavanaugh have come before the Judiciary Committee, when a very calm, measured, and very learned former state Supreme Court justice starts asking questions or rebutting slanders. And I would just hate to lose that position for you, Senator. In that position, I think it's in Judiciary, you have introduced a bill to help amplify and make permanent President Trump's EO on illegal aliens who kill Americans. You want to tell us about that?
Yeah, there's a lot of things that the president can do through executive order, but there's some things he can't do, and we want to help implement this executive order. As you know, illegal aliens, unfortunately, have run rampant during the last administration with the open borders policy of the Biden administration. And we're now sort of seeing the consequences of that. Everyone from Laken Riley's death in Georgia to crimes being committed in communities all over the country, and fentanyl coming into the country, which is the #1 cause of death for young people between the age of 18 and 45. But one thing we ought to all be able to agree on is that when illegal aliens come to the United States and they commit murders, they ought to be subject to the death penalty. So we're going to provide legislative support for President Trump's executive action and get that done as soon as we possibly can.
I applaud that. I hope that moves through Judiciary at the speed of light. Got a couple of questions for you, Senator, about the budget that got approved today by the House. That's the Senate's bill. I believe that means you on the Finance Committee will get a crack at the tax code. Is that work far advanced, or is it just beginning?
Well, I think in some ways, as hard as this was, it's just the beginning and maybe the easiest part of it. As you know, a budget is really, in the federal system, is just a framework. It's not spending. It's not actually doing the work. It's setting the ground rules, really, for what comes later, which is the reconciliation bills. That's where we extend the expiring provisions of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. And by the way, if we didn't do that, it would be a tax increase on 62% of American taxpayers, several $1 trillion in increased taxes. That would be insult to injury on top of 40-year high inflation under the Biden administration, and we can't let that happen. So the Finance Committee is going to get to work along with our other committees. On the Judiciary Committee, we're going to provide additional resources for detention and for personnel to make sure that President Trump's border policies are implemented and don't lack for resources. We're also going to plus up defense spending because, as you know, it's the most dangerous world we've had since World War II. And I appreciate President Trump saying we need to invest in our militaries and we need to return to the Reagan principle of peace through strength, and reestablish deterrence.
If we can finish where we began, the advantages of seniority in the Senate is that you also become familiar with the rules. And Senator Cornyn was the whip for a long time, so he knows these very obscure and unusual rules. Senator Collins was on yesterday, and she gave me another tip on reconciliation that Appropriations Committee has nothing to do with it. I think reconciliation may be the most complicated procedure that the Senate has. Would you agree with me on that, Senator Cornyn?
I sure would. This goes back to a 1974 Budget Act, along with all the precedents, the Byrd Rule, all that stuff. But what your viewers need to understand is this is the difference between a multi-trillion-dollar tax increase or maintaining that. But we also need to start chipping away at the national debt. And this is the first meaningful opportunity we've had to try to begin to bend that debt curve in the last generation. So we can't miss this opportunity, and thanks to President Trump in the White House and majorities in both houses, I believe we have the opportunity to do it, and I think we cannot fail.
All right, now, Senator, let me just finish with a very, very obvious plug. I don't know if you've even got a website set up for your reelect, and I hope you're not in the Senate. Okay, what is that website? Because that's what people will want to help you with.
It's johncornyn.com.
I love easy websites. JohnCornyn.com. And small donors are welcome. Large donors are welcome. Everyone is welcome. And if you just want to get involved in the campaign, whether you're listening in San Antonio or Beaumont, Houston or Dallas, wherever you are in Texas, go to JohnCornyn.com. Senator, keep coming back throughout the primary and throughout the entire election cycle. Good to see you, Senator.
Thanks for your friendship and support, Hugh.
Oh, you bet. I really, to my Texas listeners, you'd be out of your mind not to return John Cornyn to the Senate. He's really one of the most competent, capable gentlemen in Washington, D.C. And yes, you need gentlemen to get things done, not only within the conference, but within the Senate and within the Congress and with the president. Big MAGA, whether you're big MAGA or whether you're kind of a squishy Republican or anywhere in between, John Cornyn will listen to you and he'll do what's best for Texas and what's best for the United States. So get behind him at johncornyn.com. Let me tell you, we got a lot coming up today. After the break, Representative Derek Van Orden is joining us. He's like me. He thinks the Freedom Caucus just drives, he's driven nuts by the Freedom Caucus. That's because he's a SEAL for many years. And teamwork is everything. If you're not working as a team, you don't get anything done. Well, they got it together. They got the budget bill passed. We're very pleased that happened. And I'm going to talk to him about it. I've also got Jonathan William coming along from ALEC. We're going to check in on the state of the states. Josh Hammer got a brand new book out called Israel and Civilization is coming along. I got Josh Kroshauer. There's a great deal. And I've got David Van Vardanyan and his lawyer, Jared Gesner. His father, Dan's father, is being held as a political prisoner in Azerbaijan. And Mr. Genzer is known as the extractor. He's very good on hostage affairs. He worked a lot with my friend Robert O'Brien when Robert was the special envoy on hostage affairs during Trump 1. So I know that we're dealing with very important and special people there. Jim Talent will be along as well. The new Pragertopia podcast with Marissa Street has just dropped. I am on it. I'm on it with her for a long time. I'll play some excerpts for you if Dwayne ever opens up his email and gets them and edits them. They're not on the run sheet here. If I only had a producer, you would know I had this fabulous, fabulous conversation with Marissa over the weekend that has dropped over at Prager University on the nearly first 100 days and the sprint that's been ongoing from the start of it. head over to Pragertopia, or head over to Prager University to get the website that you can find the podcast on. You can also join Pragertopia, which is different from Prager University. A lot of you miss Dennis every day. We always remind you, just go to Pragertopia. But before I do that, I want to tell people in this hour, because I've done every hour, we're down to a handful of slots at the Job Creators Network Freedom Fighters Summit coming up. And the Freedom Fighters Summit is held in Savannah, Georgia this year, May 1st and 2nd. In Savannah is a wonderful place. I don't know if you've ever been there. And a great lineup. Governor Youngkin, Governor Kemp. I'm going to be there with Mike Gallagher. Mike is going to sort of host an MC. Thank goodness I don't have to do that. Kellyanne Conway will be there. Stephen Moore will be there. We'll dive deep into the budget and in particulars of this unusual election cycle. Can't wait to talk to Governor Youngkin about that. He's not on the ballot, but Virginia has this weird cycle 1 year after the presidential. They usually use it to either knock the president back 1 step or 2 steps or 4 steps sometime in New Jersey and Virginia. And we're in that cycle. No better person to talk to than Glenn Youngkin. He'll be at the Job Creator Network Summit. You get your tickets at jcn2025summit.com, jcn2025summit.com. Use the promo code Salem to get half off. Joined now by Derek Van Orden, one of our favorite guests from the House of Representatives. There he is. Congressman, congratulations. You got 2 things done today. You got the budget passed, and you sent a message to the Knucklehead Caucus. And the Knucklehead Caucus drives me crazy, but I guess they drive you crazier than me.
Hey, Hugh, that was a shot over the bow. I do not work for the Freedom Caucus. I don't work for the Republican leadership. I work for the constituents, mine, of the 3rd Congressional District of the state of Wisconsin, and I'm sick and tired of these Freedom Caucus people wasting our country's time. 435 members of Congress wasted an entire day. Now take all of those members of Congress, all of their staff, all of the money they're getting, all of the benefits that they're getting, and apply that to a budget. So these people are hiding behind this fake fiscal conservatism. And here's what they want. They want a phone call from Donald Trump. They want to go on the news. They want to make money on the internet via fundraising. They've lost the vision of why we're supposed to be here, and that is to serve our constituents. And I'm over it. And I will single-handedly destroy anything they want to do legislatively if they keep up this garbage.
Preach. Because Derek Van Orden, I've told people for years, the House doesn't work unless it works together. The Senate doesn't work unless it works together. And the president and the Congress and being together, Senate, House, and the president, nothing works unless everyone says, okay, I'm not going to get, the perfect is not going to be the enemy, the very good. And I just can't even believe it's an argument. Now, there are some idiosyncratic people that aren't really Republicans, and they ought to get primaried, like Tom Massey, and people know that I think that about Massey. But there's some smart people in the Freedom Caucus. What about teamwork do they not understand it? Or do you get it because you were a SEAL for so many years?
A little bit of both. And listen, I want to be real clear. I am personal friends with the vast majority of the Freedom Caucus. We hang out together. I know their families. But legislatively, we completely disagree. And there's a lot of things we agree on. We want a safe, prosperous, secure country that we can hand over to our children. The difference is I'm not willing to destroy what I'm trying to save. I'm also unwilling to put my own personal self-interest above the interest of the nation. I just will not do that. It is not part of my nature. So me being a SEAL, I understand that when we spell SEAL teams, it's interesting. The team is always capitalized. SEAL teams. It's never a lowercase t. Well, we got some lowercase team stuff going on here. We also got some lower L case leadership taking place. So it's got to change. We simply must need to recognize the fact that we won the election. And when you win elections, you legislate. You stop griping about stuff.
You have to get your promises delivered.
Unfortunately, there's a few members of my caucus who think that they received 77 million votes, and they didn't. One person did. His name is Donald J. Trump.
And you're doing the agenda. While I've got you, I want to ask you two Wisconsin-specific questions. One,
Yep.
do you think Canada will let Wisconsin start to export its dairy products into Canada now?
Yeah.
Good.
Dude, listen, I want to be super clear. We don't want a trade war with Canada or Mexico. We don't. They're our closest geographic partners, obviously, and also our greatest trade allies. We don't want a trade war with them. We don't want a trade war with the European Union or anything like that, right? I just had a bunch of guys from the European Union, my counterparts. I'm sitting in my office, so I was pointing at the chairs you're sitting in yesterday, from Estonia, France, and Poland, and then from the hierarchy of the European Parliament, you know? I'm like, hey, we don't want a trade war with you, but we will bury you.
Ha!
Is that clear? So we will, man. I'm like, we don't want to, but we will, and we'll crush you. Because you guys, the European Union's a mafia. And they're like, well, I go, ho, ho, ho. I lived in Germany for 3 years. I see what you do with your protectionist trade policies, and then you lie about it. Don't try to snow the snowman. I'm just telling you what's going down. We don't have time to lie to each other, just like I don't have time to listen to these Freedom Caucus jackballs, you know, run their suck on the Capitol steps and hold up progress. I don't have time for that. I'm just telling you the way it is, my European brothers and sisters. And they're like, wow, thanks. I appreciate that. I go, well, yeah.
I am so glad you're run out of patience because I need a voice, and you're my voice in the House. Second thing I want to ask you, Wisconsin Supreme Court, we lost it to the
Yes.
left. Do you expect to be redistricted out of existence? Are they coming after Derek Van Orden?
I do. I do. I simply do. I mean, Janet Protasiewicz, the previous leftist Supreme Court justice, ran on a platform of redistricting Wisconsin. They did it. Tony Evers. So this is what's just bananas, man. I ran under the maps drawn by Tony Evers, the leftist, that were upheld. And then Tony Evers brought a court case saying that his own maps were unconstitutional. You can't make this up, right? So the Supreme Court didn't pick it up because the outgoing Chief Justice of the Wisconsin Supreme Court was a blue dog Democrat. And she's like, no, this is silly, right? However, now that Susan Crawford is on there, we're going to get a new Chief Justice who's going to be a leftist. And they don't care about the law.
You're right.
So I have confidence in the United States Supreme Court to do their job. You know what I mean?
Well, I have
don't always
confidence
agree
in the
with
people of Wisconsin liking what you're doing. And tell us what the campaign website. Oh, you can't. If you're in the House, you can't. I don't know when you can. But I want people
That
to
is-
support.
Hey, when I go off campus, I'll send it to you, and then you can put it on there. And you're correct for ethical reasons, you can't do it. But hey, listen, man, this is what people need to know. The big thing that happened, that was a referendum, not on Donald Trump. That was a referendum on us not getting out the phone. Period.
Well done. Well done. Congressman Van Orden, keep coming back. Congratulations. I appreciate your messaging today to the Freedom Caucus. I'm a very happy man in the Relief Factor studio today, and you can probably tell that if you're watching on the Salem News Channel. I'm just happy. Happy John Cornyn opened the show. Happy to have Derek Van Orden. Always makes me smile while he makes sure you understand his point. But I'm really happy that the House passed the budget. There's now a framework that unlocks reconciliation. That means anything that get 51 votes in the Senate, not 60, can now pass. Now they can get to work on the authorizing committee, extend the tax cuts, build the wall, rebuild America's defenses, especially shipbuilding. President Trump signed a ship executive order last night that's got 24 sections in it. It's glorious to read. I put it on my X account. I want you to go there and get it. President opened the cabinet today saying this, cut number one.
We had a very good meeting. We're talking about a lot of different things. Consumer prices have actually dropped. There's very little inflation. Everybody predicted a lot of inflation, very little inflation. Energy costs are down. Interest rates are probably down. They scatter, but they're probably down. Prescription drug prices are even to down. We're doing very well. It's been amazing. We had a big day yesterday. There'll always be transition difficulty, but we had in history, it was the biggest day in history, the markets. So we're very, very happy with the way the country's running. We're trying to get the world to treat us fairly. This is something that should have been done 25 years ago, and it wasn't. Should have been done 40 years ago, and it wasn't. But no president was willing to take it on, but you had to. It's not sustainable. It wasn't sustainable.
The whole cabinet got to chime in on what they're doing. Secretary Hegseth, who runs Helms Defense, was there, talked about his trip to Panama, cut number 9.
Mr. President, we just got back from Panama last night. We were at the Panama Canal with their Southcom commander ships, F-18s, troops, and signed a couple of historic deals. One which is with the Panama Canal Authority, a framework for U.S. vessels, first and free through the Panama Canal. And then also a memorandum of understanding with their security minister for the presence of U.S. troops. Fort Sherman is an old U.S. base there, as well as their naval station and air station, jointly with Panama to secure the Panama Canal from Chinese influence. That's something you said, we're taking back the canal. China's had too much influence. Obama and others let them creep in. We, along with Panama, are pushing them out, sir. And so we had a very successful trip there. President Molino sends his regards, very complimentary of the U.S. He's a great ally, and I think they want the Communist Chinese out. And with our troops there partnering with their forces, we've got a chance to push them all the way out, sir.
Now, a lot of talk today about shipbuilding. National Security Advisor Ambassador Michael Waltz, he's a member of the cabinet, friend of mine. My son works for him. Always say that, always make my disclosure. But National Security Advisor Waltz was there talking about ships, cut number 10.
Mr. President, last year, the Chinese received 1,700 orders for new ships. American shipyards received 5. Under your leadership, like so many other industries, we are going to revitalize and make shipbuilding and maritime great again with these blue-collar jobs. These are the cranes, the ports, opportunity zones, and drive that investment back in. And we have, under that executive order, and also one to streamline foreign military sales for people that want to buy our equipment, and of course acquisition reform, all just this week under your leadership, Mr. President.
So we're
And
going to be
Duffy came
rebuilding
along
our
and added
ship-
to more about the executive order on shipbuilding that came out last night. Cut number 11, Secretary of Transportation Duffy.
I want to thank you as well for the shipbuilding EO. Again, to build ships, we also need mariners to sail those ships. I was just up at Kings Point for the Merchant Marine Academy a couple days ago, and we have some of the greatest young men and women who are learning how to be mechanical engineers to rebuild and fix the engines on those ships, but also how to sail ships. I would tell you that over the past decades, this academy has become, it needs some love. It's been a little bit dilapidated.
Go read the EO.
We have to invest.
Go read the EO. The other thing I want you to do is go to Israel. And the best place to find out how to do that is at goisrael.com. They're a sponsor, the Israeli Ministry of Tourism. They are a sponsor, part of the Israeli government. They haven't been a sponsor for long. I've had the same view on Israel forever. I've only been twice. It is my ambition to spend a month broadcasting there sometime. The Jewish News Syndicate has said they got the facilities, but I got to make sure they can do it so that the people who are watching on the Salem News Channel can also see me from there. But if you haven't been to Israel, you should go. It's breathtaking. It's glorious, actually. History alive, scripture alive, wonderful people, welcoming, joyous, very safe, very, 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 very safe. Plan your trip now. GoIsrael.com. Whether you're going to go next week, next month, next year, plan it now at GoIsrael.com. Great sponsor, and would love the Holy Land. You will too. GoIsrael.com. Houston Keene is the Executive Director of Democracy Restored. Houston, welcome. You know, Brent Shear has been a friend of mine for a long time, but I would not have seen his article on this climate scam had you not brought it to my attention. So welcome, thank you. Tell us about Democracy Restored first, and then let's get to Brent's article.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Hugh. It's great to be on with you. I've been listening for several years, and it's a pleasure. So, Democracy Restored is a government watchdog organization that looks or focuses on government transparency.
So, where are you based? Are you in D.C.? Are you in the Beltway, in the swamp? Or are you somewhere that you can see more clearly?
We are, thankfully, I find myself in God's country of Texas, but we're based in D.C. as well, so we're all over.
So what did Brett find, and why does it intrigue you? I read the story. I couldn't believe it, actually. That's a whole bunch of money for people, I guess 2 people. Tell folks about this climate scam.
Yeah, it's a lot of money. Well, so it starts with the National Climate Assessment, right? The NCA, and that is it's the crown jewel of climate research for the U.S. And it was written, or has been previously written, I should say now, by a consulting group called ICF. And ICF is a clearly partisan group. I mean, if you look at their website or in just a cursory Google search, they're very partisan. And they are very big on climate change in general. In fact, they are making a lot of money off of the NCA. It's been full of doom and gloom for a long time, and that document is used across all agencies and in the government to craft not only our policy for climate change, but to justify the wanton spending that we've seen.
The NCA, National Climate Action Plan, is a menace to economic prosperity. It's often in the news in California. How does it drive actual regulatory decisions, Houston?
Well, it draws on the views of over 1,000 scientists, and it informs the government of what the state of the climate science is. The question, though, isn't, or the issue really isn't the science itself, but it's the consulting group who has been in charge of, or charged with writing this for the American people on the taxpayers' dime. They're clearly partisan. They have a very, very left-leaning bent in what they do, and it's impacted U.S. policy. I mean, you can just see from, the contract itself that just got canceled was in the tens of millions of dollars. And
you see, I've got nothing against people who are partisan. I'm a partisan. I do not ask the government to support my partisanship. Is there any blue team, red team going on here? Is there another operation that's partisan on the other side writing the climate assessment, or is it all left wing, left wing, left wing?
It's from what I'm seeing, it's and what we've seen, it's very left wing. The NCA itself has been a house for doom and gloom and this doomsaying, as I call it, for the climate or on the climate, I should say. But yeah, excuse me.
Do the folks over there have any comment on the Scheer expose? It's been picked up, by the way, getting a lot of traction thanks to Democracy Restored and Houston and his team. Any word from the consultants?
And not that I've seen. It seems to be that they're clamming up a bit with this. This is a really big expose, and it's a huge contract. Tens of millions of taxpayer dollars, and their bias is being put on display for the world. And we're seeing movement in the administration towards righting that ship and getting us back to bringing us back to scientific integrity.
You're anticipating my last question, Houston. Doge would seem to be the natural partner with a review of the NCA and this particular group. Any word yet whether the reporting has sparked a close scrutiny?
Not on our ends, but I would imagine that we'll see similar contracts like this under heavy scrutiny by Doge and other groups outside, like Democracy Restored.
Well, continued success to you. I hope you get to stay in Texas and don't have to come to the Beltway. Houston Keene, nice to meet you. Welcome. DemocracyRestored.com. Follow him on, by the way, X. Now, I do want to give you a little bit of a preview. I did a podcast this weekend. It dropped yesterday with Marissa Street of Prager University. And I want to play you a couple of cuts from it. This is the first cut, number 16.
Many people would say, is this not too abrupt? Putting these tariffs on and expecting Americans who are running businesses and building businesses and trying to survive here and make ends meet pay so much more at, a week's notice, 2 weeks' notice.
The headline in the Financial Times, and I think it's the best newspaper in the world. I only subscribe to two, Wall Street Journal and Financial Times. The headline yesterday was, countries rush to make deals with Trump, offering trade concessions, purchases of American goods, or decoupling from China. Countries are lining up to make deals with us. I remind everyone, Donald Trump is and remains a developer. Donald Trump kicked off 80 development projects on Wednesday. That was Liberation Day. Doors open, let's haggle. And he's going to haggle. Is it going to work? China hit us with a huge reciprocal tariff. That's the only one I don't care about. I don't want to trade with China. God bless China. May they be free again. We didn't trade with Russia or the Soviet Union. We do not want them to be stronger. So they're in a trade war with us. Fine. They were in a trade war with the Soviet Union for however long, 1947 to 1991. We're in a trade war with China. Fine. I don't want to be in a trade war with Japan. On the other hand, let's find out what reality is. There are some extremists who believe that we ought to be subsidized by these countries that we have subsidized for all these years. That's not me. I just want to get to a normal, level playing field where we're all on one team. It goes on for a long time. Marissa Street, very smart. She's the CEO of Prager University. And I was up there this past weekend, and we talked through everything that's happened. We're not quite at 100 days yet. And we talked about the whole concept of 100 days being kind of a anachronism from FDR's supermajorities in both the House and the Senate. But it's still a useful journalistic measuring stick. So I sat down with Marissa for a good hour and 10 minutes, and that's available at Prager University. I retweeted it last night. You just go over to Hugh Hewitt on X or Marissa Street on X, follow and find Prager University. It's a great podcast by name. She's really smart. She's really good at that business. I'll do a market report next hour. I've got Senator Eric Schmidt coming up, Jonathan Williams. I got a lot of good guests coming up in the next hour. Don't go anywhere. As well as David Vardanian, whose father is in a prison in Armenia, or actually in Azerbaijan. He's an Armenian Christian. We're going to dive into that with Josh Krashow. We're going to dive into other stuff. Lots coming up. I was looking at the market. The 10-year Treasury down today at 4.3. That's good. That's normal. It should keep dropping. That's very good for those of you who want to borrow money, especially if you want to borrow money to buy a house. AndrewandTodd.com are my sponsors. They are with Sierra Pacific Mortgage. They have done thousands and thousands and thousands of mortgages for people listening to the Hugh Hewitt Show. And if you are watching on the Salem News Channel, you see their number there, 888-888-1172. If you're listening on the radio, try and remember 888-888-1172. But if you can't remember 888-888-1172, remember AndrewandTodd.com, because they are the best. They really are the best. Now, I said they've done thousands and thousands and thousands of mortgages, but they've also told thousands and thousands and thousands of people that it wasn't right for them to refinance, that it wasn't time for them to get a new mortgage, that they shouldn't churn. That's not who they are. They're honest brokers of the best deal that you can have for the effort that you want to get done. You might want to buy a new house because you have to move. You might want to refinance an existing house. You might want to get a reverse mortgage if you're a senior citizen and you need cash. Call AndrewandTodd.com, because Sierra Pacific Mortgage is a bank. They actually underwrite the loans. They do the lending. 888-888-1172, and they'll walk you through it. From start to finish, they will walk you through it. Can I play a little bit more of the PragerU podcast, cut number 18? I taped this last week. We're in the new Cold War, Cold War 2.0, with China. And the envelope in which I understand the tariffs is that we have to reshore critical industries before that conflict comes, or in order to deter that conflict. And therefore, even though you're our friend, like Israel went to zero tariffs this week. They're the equal of any of our strategic allies. Absolutely. No matter who you are, Australia, Japan, you all have to treat us like the leader, because we're all carrying the load, and you're now going to help us carry the load by at least lowering every barrier to trade. And you might have zero tariffs, but you might have a barrier to trade. Now I'm going to get into economics, so buyer beware. Stop. Europe has a Buyer value beware. attack. The good news is Marissa did not press me too hard on the economics, and we stayed a lot on the law. It's over at PragerU. It's a great podcast. It really is. She knows what she's doing. It was fabulously produced. As always, the PragerU team, top drawer. Everything over at PragerU is terrific. Don't forget Pragertopia as well. If you're missing Dennis, Pragertopia is your fix. But PragerU is where you go for everything that you need. With Marissa running at Marissa Street is a fabulous CEO of PragerU. Don't miss this episode. I enjoyed it immensely. Welcome the first time in a long time, Senator Eric Schmidt has been here. Our mutual friend Tim Garrison keeps kicking me in the butt and saying, when are you going to have Senator Schmidt back on? I said, it'll happen. He's on Judicial. You got to talk to him. Welcome. I want to talk to you, Senator, about Trump versus JGG, which was a 5-4 win for the president this week. But it had to come out of the, quote, shadow docket, emergency docket, kind of a silly term. Supreme Court ruling. A, what'd you make of the ruling? B, was it fast enough? And what do we do about these district courts and nationwide injunctions? I can't hear you, Senator. That's too bad. We will reset and come back to it because he was the Attorney General of Missouri. And as the Attorney General of Missouri, he was we get him on the phone if his speaker isn't working. The Attorney General of Missouri, he brought a lot of very important antitrust cases that had nationwide impact, but he didn't seek nationwide injunctions, I don't believe. And as that, he's a really smart guy, and we want his take. In the meantime, while we're waiting to get the connection fixed, let me play you Lee Zeldin today talking about at the cabinet how the courts are killing us. Courts and regulations. Cut number 15.
The Biden EPA was strangulating the economy. The Trump EPA understands it's not a binary choice. We can protect the environment and grow the economy. Working with Doge and Elon Musk, we've now canceled $22 billion worth of grants. And we have launched what is the largest deregulatory action in the history of the country, just in one agency. That's how much of a mess the Biden EPA left us. It is going to end up reducing the cost of living. It's going to create jobs. It's going to make it easier to purchase a car. It'll be easier to heat your home. We're proud of this effort. The effort that we have is fulfilling the mandate that you earned from the American public. Clean air, land, and water for all Americans, unleashing energy dominance, permitting reform, advancing cooperative federalism, making America the AI capital of the world, and bringing back American auto jobs. When you called me that day asking for me to take this position, I was honored. And you were very specific and clear in what you wanted us to accomplish. We understand our mission, and at the Trump EPA, we're going to make it proud.
I'm very happy to okay, Lee Zeldin is on fire. So is Eric Schmidt. I think we've got him back now. Senator, can you hear me this time?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. So Trump versus JGG and nationwide injunctions. What do we do?
Yeah, so I think that, as I've been saying, by the way, Hugh, it's great to be with you again. It's been a little while. So it's great to be with you. We can make it work. But look, as I've been saying, I think a lot of these lower court rulings, it's like a bit of a sugar high for the left. But as they make their way through our court system, the courts of appeal, the Court of Appeals and then the Supreme Court, President Trump's well within his rights to do a lot of the things that he's doing, and I'll walk you through that. But this one in particular, it's interesting. Judge Boasberg on this, on the criminal aliens who were here who were deported, somehow he got the case. And not a lot of people are talking about this, but he wasn't the emergency assignment judge that day. It rotates every day. He wasn't. Somehow at 1:30 in the morning, he got the case. Now, he's the presiding judge. Maybe he was tipped off. I don't really know, but it's very unusual. The emergency judge 100% of the time gets the case. So Judge Boasberg got it, in my view, inserted himself into this. But ultimately, he was slapped down. Now, it was a standing issue. It's a standing ruling, so it's going to be sort of sent back. This thing's going to continue to get litigated. But look, President Trump, these are core commander-in-chief authorities, right? These are Article II authorities. By calling on the Alien and Enemies Act specifically, he's declared this a predatory incursion. He's well within his rights to begin these deportations. This is like a federal district court judge directing missile strikes or troop movements. These are core Article II functions for the President of the United States. And then, of course, you've got all the domestic cases like firings, hirings, personnel, payroll, those sorts of things. Again, very much within the realm of what the Article II branch can do, within its own powers. Very different, Hugh, I'll close with this. It's very different than what Joe Biden was doing when he was president. He was using his authority to expand the power, right? He was using his authority to make OSHA require 100 million people to get the COVID shot, or the student loan debt forgiveness scam. I happened to bring both of those cases when I was Missouri Attorney General, and we won at the Supreme Court because he was expanding the Article II powers beyond what was ever intended. So what President Trump's trying to do here is, he talked about securing the border and deportations. He's doing that. And he also talked about reining in the size and scope of government. He's doing that too.
Now, Senator Schmidt, I've read Trump versus JGG. I've taught it twice this week. It's a very limited decision, but it is very explicit that habeas lies only in the jurisdiction where the prisoner is. And so, I mean, the Supreme Court was trying to be as direct as possible. Do you think they are moving fast enough? There's a critique, and I think this is maybe why Justice Barrett joined the dissent, that the Supreme Court is moving too fast. But the modern administrative state, as AEI scholar Adam White was making an argument on the Commentary podcast, is so big and so fast, if the court doesn't pick up the pace, like Mark Twain said about a lie, it's halfway around the world before truth gets its boots on. The Supreme Court has to pick up the pace on these things. Do you agree?
I do, because what you're seeing now with the nationwide injunctions, these are these are temporary restraining orders, which aren't reviewable right away, as you know, to the Supreme Court. So normally in the past, temporary restraining orders were just for a few days until you had a hearing on the merits for a preliminary injunction or ultimately a permanent injunction. So, but what's happening now is these judges are extending it as long as they can, maybe even sometimes for over a month. So I think it's important. One takeaway, I agree with you on this potentially being a narrow decision, not being under the guise of the Administrative Procedure Act, but sort of as you alluded to, on a habeas sort of action. But a very important thing did happen. The Supreme Court took it, and they basically overturned the lower court on it. It really was a challenge to the temporary restraining order. So that's one mechanism by which these district court judges have had an outsized impact, which is a relatively new phenomenon. Well, President Trump has, he's already seen more of these in the first 80 days than you did in Obama and Biden's 12 years. So there's a lot of abuse happening right now.
Yeah, the best part of the opinion is the per curiam, but they still say, the AEA, the Alien Enemies Act, is entitled to a lot of deference because it's the president acting at the flood. I think Robert Jackson would call it Zone 1 in Youngstown, Sheeton 2. So I was glad to get kind of a nod and a message to the district court judges around the country. Go slow here, because there's a lot of deference involved with the AEA when it's combined with Article 2. I'm an optimist on that. Are you an optimist on the removal cases? Because this strikes at the heart of the administrative state. If the president can roll in and replace the, quote, independent agencies, which have no provision for in the Constitution, if he can yank the lefties off of these commissions, I'm all for that. We have to deal with it if we lose the presidency. But what do you think, Senator?
Yeah, I think this is, as you know, people who've looked at this over the years have been waiting for a case, and I think that's what's going to happen, the so-called independent agencies. This is going to make its way to the Supreme Court, and we're going to have a decision once and for all. Interestingly, and I can't remember the name off the top of my head, I had an X thread about it earlier this week, that Joe Biden helped kind of set the stage for this with some of his firings, actually. So look, I think a lot of these are headed, especially the removal cases. You also have a decision that came down this week on the probationary employees, and that's an important ruling that's gone in President Trump's favor right now. All the district court rulings have been stayed in the sense that President Trump can move forward with the firing of these probationary employees. That's an important thing. Look, if you believe, here's what's interesting, Hugh, is for a long time, I've always said that the administrative state's totally not accountable. Nobody knows who the undersecretary of the EPA is that they can hold accountable for a guidance letter that destroys a family business. But the argument against that is, well, no, actually, there is accountability. It's with the president, right? And the voters can have, if that's true, the president does have the authority, of course, to hire and fire like he should be able to and run the executive branch. And so there's a lot of important principles at play here. But if we're serious about reigning in the administrative state or dismantling the administrative state because it's totally unaccountable, I think I'm optimistic about the conditions here to challenge a lot of those things more than we've ever had. I think this court is ready to rule on these, and I'm hopeful.
Yeah, Chevron decision, Loper Bright. I'm very optimistic. There's one thing I want to get into with you, Senator. It's going to romp into my break, and I'll talk to you at the break and play it later in the program, but I'll set it up right now. For years and years, I've complained to my friends in the Senate, I got a few, that the blue slip rule just screws California. And I'm out here 4 months every year when I teach every other year. And there are no district court judges in the Trump one because they wouldn't agree to any. If you live in Missouri, you're blessed. You got Eric Schmidt and Josh Hawley working on who's going to be on the district court. That doesn't happen out here. we don't get any judges at all. So I'm going to ask Eric Schmidt during the break. I'll play it for you later. What do we do about this? Because it's a real problem in blue jurisdictions where they can't get one decent district court judge confirmed. Senator, I lined it up. When you've got a red state, you and Josh Hawley sit down and you send a list of district court judges over to the White House. You negotiate a bit. You say, hey, we want Tim Garrison here or somebody else there and doing this. It gets done. California's got 2 blue senators and nothing happens. How do we fix that problem? I don't know if there's a district court judge with common sense been appointed since W, maybe even before that.
Yeah, so I'm always going to shoot you straight on this one. I think the reality is if we actually believe the district court judges, which is honestly the big debate that we're having right now, what should the impact of a district court ruling be? Should it be nationwide or should it be more localized and with the parties that are before the court? I think we believe that it's the latter, not the former. It does mean that those home state senators have a lot more to say about who moves forward. And I can tell you that we've got 4 or 5 district court openings now. Because when we were working with the Biden administration, he was trying to appoint judges, we weren't going to let these radical judges through. And so it kind of cuts both ways. I will say this, though. I think the fact that it's a Republican-held Senate now, that we've got a majority, that does help because there's only so long that you can have some of these vacancies, even in a state like California. So at a minimum, hopefully would moderate those judges. I would love to see a bunch of Scalias populate the federal bench in a state like California. But our better shot probably is at the circuit court level. And as you know, the Ninth Circuit, actually, after President Trump's first term, you can get a decent panel now.
Yes, you
in the
can.
Ninth Circuit.
Yes, you
and
can.
that's a big deal. That's a sea change because, as you know, a lot of these cases were filed, and they made their way to the Ninth Circuit, and that created a real problem nationally. But I think we're moving away from that. And if you get another 4 years here, President Trump appointing people even at the circuit court level, it would minimize, I think, the problem that you're talking about.
Quick exit question. Is there any way Eric Schmidt and a bunch of, very good lawyers to go find Senator Schiff and go find Senator Padilla and sit down and just say, let's get some district court judges who've been trial lawyers who are not particularly political but can move the docket? Because it's also a docket problem in California. You can't get to court. Yeah. Is there any way to actually talk sense to your colleagues in the Senate? Especially, Adam's new, but Alex has been around for a couple of years.
We'll see. Hope springs eternal, and both Senator Hawley and I are on the Judiciary Committee, and so are Senators Padilla and Schiff are on the Judiciary Committee. So maybe there is something that could get worked. I would hope so, because at some point you do run into the sort of the administration of justice issue where you just don't have enough people handling the court system. Yeah, in the cases that are being filed.
Senator Schmidt, good to talk to you. I love talking law with you and with Senator Hawley and with Senator Cruz and Senator Cotton. Whenever I get a lawyer, I like to go into the weeds, and I think the audience does as well.
It's great to be with you, and I was going to reference the Judge Justice Jackson's concurrence in the Youngstown Steel case, but you beat me to it, so that was a lot of fun.
All right, well, I just, if I can stay at Eric Schmidt for even one day, I'm happy. Thank you, Senator. Thank you for making it happen. Sorry about the audio problem. We'll talk to you again soon.
See you, Hugh.
I think Jonathan Williams is with me. Is he? He's not here yet. From ALEC.org, American Legislative Exchange Council.org/Hugh, if you want to sign up for their weekly newsletter on the state of the states. And I need to talk to Jonathan about regulatory reform, because I got this big, long list yesterday of all the different regulatory reform things that are going on across the United States. And it's marvelous. Not surprisingly, Utah is leading the way. But if other states, Wyoming and Utah are like way ahead of everybody, begin to cut back on the state regulations as well as the federal regulations, then we'll be in a great place. I don't know if ALEC has model legislation on this. They have model legislation on most things, but if they don't, they will develop it. American Legislative Exchange Council, ALEC.org/Hugh, if you want to sign up for that newsletter. Doug Burgum was at the cabinet meeting today. Oh, we got Jonathan. Hello, Jonathan. I was just about to give up on you.
Great to see you, my friend.
I was just talking about the regulatory reform notes I had yesterday. Is there a model statute that ALEC has produced for other states to follow Utah and Wyoming on? Because that's a huge economic driver if we can get the states to deregulate.
Absolutely. I mean, essentially what we have is a model policy. We've been seeing some huge wins from Utah, and then recently we had Kentucky. The legislature overrode Governor Beshear's veto on this for the state level REINS Act idea that any of these major costs that are being done by administrative rule need to have legislative approval in advance. And so obviously a great follow on to the huge victory in the Chevron deference decision. And in this case, empowering where it should be empowered in the first place, the legislative branch to approve any of these costly rules that have a certain price tag. And states will vary on what that price tag looks like. But the important thing is the legislative branch, those are serving the people elected duly by their citizens, have that final say on things that are very costly to some of these states' businesses environment.
Jonathan, I'll get to rich states, poor states in a second, because I've got a little note here that maybe you're getting close, and I hope Ohio moved up. Has Ohio moved up this year?
I think you're going to like how Ohio's ranking, and I think you're going to like how Ohio's going to rank in the coming years even more. If what I see in the news, people like Vivek Ramaswamy talking about eliminating the income tax, I think the discussion, I was just in Columbus, Hugh, a couple of weeks ago, and the discussion there is moving to a flat tax even this session and cutting rates dramatically in the Buckeye state. So I know as much as a Michigander, it pains me to say this, Ohio, I think, is leading the way in the Midwest in terms of a state turning it around, and I couldn't be prouder of our ALEC members leading so many of those victories.
Yeah, Jonathan, this is a shameless plug. I think ALEC ought to have its annual meeting in Columbus. It's clearly, hey, we're the national champions, right? So we lost to Michigan, but we won. It inspired the Buckeyes to win it all. And Columbus is booming, and their legislature is doing good things, and Governor DeWine is doing good things. And either David Yost or Vivek is going to be the governor in a year and a half. How about that? Can you get ALEC to go there for I think everyone would love Columbus. They would love downtown Columbus. I'm sure you love downtown Columbus.
It's a fun state capital. I'll say that. And, if Ohio keeps moving so quickly in the right direction, I think it's in contention. I mean, as you know, Hugh, we have Senate President Rob McCauley sitting on the ALEC Board of Directors, just doing such a great job over there, Speaker Huffman and the whole crew there. So we're really excited about what's going on. And glad Michigan could play a small role in that success this year.
Yeah, you don't always have to say that state up north whenever we're talking about the land of the free and the home of the brave down south. Tell me about rich states, poor states. It comes out on April 15th. Any major surprises? Look, it's sort of like Hack Madness that's run by the Ruthless podcast. You always know who's going to win. I kind of always assume Utah or Florida is going to win. Any upsets in the making?
There sure are, I was in Albany, New York this week with our New York delegation and Colonel Smullen, Assemblyman Byrne there, and it was a great event there where we put together. New York has been a bookend for many years on the what not to do side of the rankings at dead last. That will likely continue in the foreseeable future unless changes are made in New York. We'll be flying out west, Hugh, so I think your intel was exactly right that you're going to see some of the familiar faces once again at the top of the rankings. And I'll give you a little bit of a clue. We talked last time about the SEC being such an impactful region when it comes not just to football, but to economics. We're going to see a major winner coming out of the SEC region in a state that just enacted major tax reform in the last year. They're going to be the big winners this year, Hugh.
Kind of a hint towards Mississippi, but we'll let that go until next week when we talk. I want to talk about specifically Medicaid reform. It's on the list of things that you're working on. It got done in Idaho. The Senate and the House passed the budget today. They got to look at Medicaid. They got to fix Medicaid. What did they do in Idaho, and how can that inform other states and the federal process of fixing Medicaid, which is badly broken and wildly expensive?
Well, you're right. And the discussion is needed here in Washington. We're seeing leaders here in Washington begin to bring that up again. But, as always, Hugh, states have led the way, and we're seeing states like Idaho push back this year to add things like the work requirements to the expansion of the so-called Affordable Care Act with that Medicaid piece. But we're also seeing states wisely look around the corner to these discussions in D.C. right now, saying we are way out in front of our skis at the state level for the states that have expanded, unwisely so, that Medicaid piece. And for states like Idaho to say, if and when the federal government reduces aid to the states, they want to be ready. And I think that's exactly right. And this is one of the things that Utah has kept them at number one in so many years in the rankings in the past, Hugh, is they have these contingency plans in place to not be tied completely to the federal problems in the era of $36 trillion of national debt that we have. So kudos to Governor Little, to the legislature that put that through this year. It's a rational move. And given the discussions in Washington right now, there are a whole lot more states need to move in that direction.
Jonathan, do you think we can get people to understand Medicaid is not medical care? It's a piece of paper. For many years in California, when I lived there, I was on a board that gave a lot of money away to free clinics and Medi-Cal opportunities. The problem is often not that Medicaid is rare, it's that no doctors want it. It's so bad. Do you think there's awareness of this at the state level, and is it spreading to the federal level?
Not as much as it needs to be. That's why these conversations are so educational. That's what the work that Alec and our members are doing across the country is so important, to relay that important message. And it's bad insurance anyways, and when it comes to the individuals. And one of the things that so many people forget is Obamacare essentially robbed the program to cover working age, able-bodied men. Out there, and in many cases disincentivize them from going to the workplace altogether. And so we're seeing this labor shortage. We're seeing so many of the fiscal challenges around this for bad insurance that doctors don't want to take. And it's at the end of the day, signing states up to financial catastrophe if and when the federal government reduces aid to the states. And they've based so much of their budget on federal funds. In fact, in a couple of states now, Hugh, this is a big shocker. It shocked so many people. A couple of states, more than 50% of their total budget is now coming from the feds. That's incredible.
It's so upside down. Jonathan, in the list of notes about the stuff you're keeping an eagle eye on, there is this Protecting Teens Online bill in Tennessee. Now, that's near and dear to my heart, but it's also, I know constitutional law. You can't be overbroad. You can't be vague. It's very difficult to do these sorts of things. What are they doing in the Tennessee bill? Do you think it will pass constitutional muster?
Well, I think it is. And this is very similar to the ALEC model, and it's similar to what states like Utah and others are looking at, is essentially the policy directs the State Department of Education to develop curriculum to instruct kids between the 6th and 12th grade range on how to safely navigate as much as you can social media and the internet. It's not a overly burdensome policy that we've seen maybe even introduced in other states, but it's something that simply adds that level of instruction to grades 6 through 12. And then hopefully at the end of the day, this is not something obviously, Hugh, that needs to be done solely in the classroom. This is a parental responsibility. We hope that parents take a much more active role in their kids' development and their interaction with social media sites and online broadly. But this is a step in the right direction to say we at least need to be talking about some of the best practices for online safety for teens and for kids. And this is just an important piece that Tennessee moved overwhelmingly on a bipartisan vote in the right direction.
So it's a curriculum content bill, not a content viewpoint non-neutral restriction of the internet. Is that right?
That's right. It's essentially just an educational piece that needs to be part of the solution. Obviously, parents need to be a much larger part of the solution, but something that states can be doing very much within a constitutional construct without any kind of challenge, I think. And what you're going to see is many more states, I think, move in that direction.
Jonathan, thank you for the extra time. Jonathan Williams is the CEO or the Chief Economic Officer or something or other at ALEC, but I like him. He's a good radio guest. And Ohio's moving up in the rich states, poor states standing. We'll know more about that next week. Go to richstatespoorstates.org or go to alec.org/Hugh. I'll let you know how the Buckeyes are doing. Don't worry about that. We won't talk about that state up north. Thank you, Jonathan. We try and spend some time on this program making sure that the audience is aware there are political prisoners around the world who are American. One of them is Ruben Vardanyan, being held in, I believe, Azerbaijan. His son, David, joins us, along with Jared Gednser, who is an internationally known human rights lawyer. Welcome. David, can you tell us what's going on with your dad? Not a lot of Americans are clued on the Azerbaijani-Armenian dispute.
Thank you so much, Mr. Hewitt, for the opportunity to speak about an often forgotten conflict, considering what is happening in the world. So My father, Ruben Vardanian, has been illegally arrested in Azerbaijan for over 550 days. He is unfortunately one of 23 Armenian prisoners currently illegally detained by Baku, some of whom are political prisoners, some of whom are prisoners of war who haven't been released by Baku since the 2020 war. The reason that they're arrested basically is simple, because they're Armenians who stood up for the rights of ethnic residents of Nagorno-Karabakh to live and thrive in their homeland, in their ancestral homeland that was there for thousands of years, and is actually one of the cradles of Christian heritage, with monasteries dating back to the 10th and 9th century.
I'm in Southern California. I know lots of Armenian Americans, and I know about the tradition in Armenia. And I followed the war. And Jared Genzer, you're known as the extractor. You get people out. Tell us how this war managed to take in bystanders like Ruben, David's dad, and just Christians doing their thing along the border.
Look, I mean, President Ilham Aliyev of Azerbaijan has a long history of not just persecuting others, but persecuting his own people. In October of 2023, he launched an ethnic cleansing campaign that pushed the 120,000 ethnic Armenian Christian population, the entire population of Nagorno-Karabakh, a region that historically had been Armenian, but was under now Azerbaijani control, across the border into Armenia. This was a well-planned and executed ethnic cleansing campaign. It also included dismantling the government of Nagorno-Karabakh, which David's father, Ruben Vardanian, had been a part briefly as a state councilor. And he also, to ensure that few people could speak out for this Armenian Christian population, grabbed as many of the former leaders of Nagorno-Karabakh as he could, which included Ruben Vardanian, but also 3 former presidents, a former foreign minister, a former president of the National Assembly, all Armenian Christian leaders of Nagorno-Karabakh who were all grabbed as part of this campaign. And they've been detained really ever since then. It's obviously a very, very difficult situation and a challenging one. President Trump, when he ran for president in October of 2024, called what happened in Nagorno-Karabakh an ethnic cleansing, something the Biden administration wasn't even willing to do, and said he would speak up for persecuted Christians. And I'm pleased to report that the Trump administration is doing a lot already to engage on the situation and to try to get a peace deal in place between Armenia and Azerbaijan, which has been a longstanding and historic dispute. But President Trump has made very, very clear that the release of the prisoners, of the Armenian Christian prisoners, has to happen, before or at the time of a peace agreement.
David, can you tell me about the conditions of confinement that your father is in? Are you able to talk to him? Are you able to see him? Is he being isolated, or is he treated relatively well for a political prisoner?
Yeah, thank you for that question. I think it's really important for the audience to understand the nature of the situation we're dealing with. So, according to many NGOs, including Freedom House, Azerbaijan is ranked as one of the least free countries in the world, less free than Iran, than Venezuela, and many other authoritarian regimes. So the issue that we've had, that since Dad's arrest in September 2023, none of the family have been able to see him in person. The only thing that we've had is some semi-regular phone calls that are obviously monitored from the prison, which we're still grateful for, but nonetheless, Dad cannot speak freely, and it's only for a couple of minutes. And then finally, what we did have is the International Red Cross, which visited the prisoners once every couple of months. But we just learned very tragically that at the beginning of this year, Azerbaijan announced the closure of many international NGOs, including the Red Cross in the country, meaning that it's even more isolated. Just to highlight how much of a isolation Dad is in, Jared, our lawyer, who has been on the team since the end of 2024, hasn't been able to not only visit Dad, but even speak to him or see any of the case materials. So this case is done in a complete isolation against all international norms and laws. And
pause right there. I'm going to continue talking with David about his dad, Ruben, and what we can do to help. So don't go anywhere. The Extractor really does get stuff done. And Jared Genzer is well known for being a miracle worker. Hope, pray that he gets one done here for all the Armenian Christians in Azerbaijan's way. Joined by Josh Kraushaar, editor of the Jewish Insider. I want to talk to you, Josh, about the visit of Prime Minister Netanyahu. Our friends at Commentary Magazine podcast went back and forth on whether or not the Prime Minister got anything out of the visit. I just think it's always good to have the Israeli Prime Minister be the only one who's been here twice. What do you think happened during that visit?
Well, look, here's the good, and here is the not so good. I think from the perspective of the Israeli government. I mean, first of all, this is the second visit from Prime Minister Netanyahu in just a little over 2 months, which is a sign of a close alliance, a close U.S.-Israel relationship, and deep respect between the two leaders. On the other hand, I think even though ostensibly the visit was about tariffs and the concern, as many world leaders have had, about the tariffs that were initially imposed by the administration, the reality is that there has been concern about the state of the talks scheduled for this weekend in Oman about between the U.S. and Iran over their nuclear program. And I don't think, reading between the lines, that Israel was entirely satisfied about where the U.S. stood. I think they're satisfied publicly that the U.S. is committed, as Trump said yesterday, that there's no tolerance for an Iranian nuclear program and the military option is on the table. But behind the scenes, and I think there's a specific concern about Steve Witkoff, who's the point person, perhaps a little too willing to make concessions and a little too eager to make a deal if the situation presents itself. And you can see that between the lines.
Let's dig into that. That's what I've heard. I don't know Mr. Witkoff. He's welcome anytime he wants to be on the show. What he did in the deal before the inauguration was fine by me. And then when Hamas started to go rogue, he threw down on them. And now the IDF is all over Gaza, and they've opened up the Morag corridor so that Rafah is effectively cut off from Khan Yunis. I understand what the IDF is doing. And he isn't objecting. He's not doing it. I expect him fully to smell out a dodge. Dr. Orden, Ambassador Orden comes on. He says, the Iranians are very good at doing nothing for a long period of time when they want to stall. Developers are very good at smelling out people who want to stall and not sell. So I'm not as worried about Witkoff. Why are people so worried about Witkoff?
I think your intuition is right, Hugh, in that the reason people are worried is that Witkoff made comments on national television about Hamas, which he actually walked back. He said he was naive and didn't understand. Didn't fully appreciate the intransigence of the terrorist group, but he made comments about Hamas and their intentions early on in the Trump administration, and also about Russia that I think suggested that maybe he was a little naive or a little too willing to accept some of our enemies or Israel's a group like Hamas their comments at face value rather than to have the deep-seated skepticism. He comes at it from a business perspective, as you said, Hugh, whereas someone who's got a little more experience in the diplomatic realm might have a little more cynicism about the intentions of these actors. But I think that has changed. And look, by the way, Hugh, President Trump said that these were going to be direct talks with Iran, and so far, at least, the Iranian government has not reciprocated.
First thing they did, those morons. First thing they did was say Donald Trump's a liar. That is not the way to make peace with America or actually open up your doors. Donald Trump says direct talks, and some senior Iranian official says, no, we're going to Oman. We do not deal with the big Satan. And, the president's not going to put up with that for very long. They can't play that old game with this game. I don't think. I would not be surprised if Witkoff is out of there in 24 hours.
It's still a question of whether he goes, because the Iranians have offered their foreign minister. But I think the anticipation from the U.S. side has been that these are going to be, or they should be at least, direct talks. So that may scuttle any diplomacy before it even begins. So we'll see where Witkoff, what his travel schedule looks like. But I'm not even sure if they're 100% on in the first place.
And what is your understanding of the IDF's level of intensity? I just read a piece by Emmanuel Fabian. Manny Fabian's a very good reporter for Times of Israel, saying there isn't a lot of combat going on in Gaza. Basically, the remaining Hamas terrorists are running away. Is that your understanding?
Yeah, you and I read that same reporting. Look, not a lot of ground fighting has taken place despite all the noise. A lot of airstrikes, especially in southern Gaza. They've expanded the buffer zone along the border. But if you read that analysis, it actually says that the goal of the operation is less to oust Hamas from power. And there's some, I think, anonymous quotes in there that suggest that that's going to be very difficult to do, which is quite a concession from the Israeli side. But it's more to give it more Israeli leverage to cut a deal that can release the remaining hostages that Hamas holds. There have been indications that there could be some progress in the negotiations along those lines, but and Steve Witkoff has also been involved in that sphere. But the big news, the big headline out of that Times of Israel piece is that there's not a whole lot of military gain other than just eliminating some mid-level commanders, expanding the buffer zone, and hitting some sites in southern Gaza. So it may not be quite as much of a game changer as we thought in March.
Now I'm just looking for a guess, Josh Kraushaar. Do you think the Israeli Supreme Court is going to dare try and restore the Shin Bet head to the leadership after he's been fired?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a great read on the political moment right now in Israel. The bureaucracy tends to win out, and that's a source of Netanyahu's frustration. But Netanyahu also made a blunder in that regard, in that his appointment, or the person he was intending to pick to replace the Shin Bet leader he ousted, was someone who spoke out against Trump and created some problems in Israel because he was very anti-Trump at one point. So he ended up not getting the job, and there's still a lot of, it's not just a matter of whether Bibi has the right to oust the Shin Bet chief, but who the successor will be, and that's created a vacuum at a very delicate and volatile time in Israeli politics.
Always good to know. Josh Kraushaar, good to talk to you. Follow Josh on X at Josh Kraushaar. I want to talk to you about the market today because American Federal is my sponsor. AmericanFederal.com buys and sells gold. You can call them right now if you look at the number on your screen. If you're watching on the Salem News Channel, 1-800-221-7694. But if you're listening in your car, 1-800-221-7694. Might be easy to remember AmericanFederal.com. Today's market was a profit-taking day after the explosion yesterday that was extraordinary. The NASDAQ went up 12% yesterday. Well, the NASDAQ went down 4% today. And I knew that was going to happen. I think I didn't trade anything, by the way. I did not buy or sell a thing for the last 2 weeks. That's not how investors work. Investors are long-term and patient. That's why I buy gold every year at the same time from Nick Grovich and his team at American Federal, because I want a dollar cost average. Now, I bought in January, so I'm a happy man. Gold today is at $3,188. The NASDAQ went down, the S&P went down, the Dow went down, and gold went up 3.5%. So gold dipped down to the 2000s last week, and my eyebrows kind of shot up. But I don't run around and buy based on the market. I invest on the dollar cost basis. So it's like clockwork with me. The year ends, buy some gold. So start a habit. Maybe you buy some gold with your tax return. Maybe you just decide to buy gold on tax day to realize that the government doesn't have all your money. Whatever you decide to do. Maybe you want to sell gold because you got to pay some taxes. Nick will buy your gold too. Remember, there's a commission, whether you're buying or selling, but they're so honest and so straightforward and so happy that they've been doing this for 40 years. Nick is a very, very established, trusted individual in the gold business. That's not always the case. There's a bell curve and everything. Nick is on the far right end of that bell curve for good and trustworthy. On the far left, you don't want to deal with those people ever again. Go with Nick. Call him up. 800-221-7694. Because it's going to be volatile for a long time. It's just going to stay volatile. It is volatile. It's going to be volatile. Now, let me go to Doug Burgum at the cabinet today, cut number 14.
Well, Mr. President, one of your primary administration goals is to make sure that we unleash American energy. And of course, the strategy behind that is when we do that, it helps make it more affordable for all Americans. Energy isn't just industry. It is the foundation of every other industry, whether it's food, manufacturing, clothing, transportation. And then also when we've got the ability to generate and not just be energy independent, but energy dominant, then we have the opportunity
That's what I wanted you to hear.
Sell energy to our
is
friends
the
and allies.
foundation of everything. That's why Doug Burgum is chair of the American Energy Dominance Council, and Energy Secretary Chris Wright is also on that. And that's where we're heading. And the House passing the budget today unlocks reconciliation to clear away a lot of the idiocy, the extremism of the last 4 years that blocked American energy dominance. Get back to number one, lower the cost of energy, expand the grid, expand the production, drive down prices. I welcome Josh Hammer, senior editor at National Review and the author of this brand new and riveting book, Israel and Civilization, The Fate of the Jewish Nation and the Destiny of the West. Josh is a first-time guest. Welcome, Josh. Good to see you and meet you in person.
Hugh, it's great to see you, good sir. Longtime fan of your work. I really appreciate the opportunity to discuss the book with you.
Well, I want to tell you that you had me, you lost me, you got me back, and there's lots to talk about. And so I got to tell everyone there's a lot in this book. Israel and Civilization truly is a cri de core. But I want to start with the most interesting fact of many interesting facts and people I've never heard of. Obviously, I'm Christian, you're Jewish. There's a lot of evidence that you put it into the record so people can understand it, but it's new to me. This fact I think everyone is going to find amazing. Between October 7th and December 25th of 2023, that's after the massacre, obviously, more than 270,000 Israelis applied for new gun licenses. During the same time period, armed civilian rapid response team expanded in number from 70 to 900. You know, Josh, that in itself is a story that everyone ought to understand, that you don't want to be caught out when evil arrives.
Hugh, I devote 2,000 words in this chapter towards the end of the book about the need for Jews to train with firearms. I've been very passionate about this for a very, very long time. It's one of my great frustrations in general that more American Jews are politically liberal, but maybe above all the fact that they just reject firearm culture, when in reality, the Second Amendment is really the great equalizer. I mean, what is the famous quote from Samuel Colt of Colt Firearms? He said that God made man and then Sam Colt made them equal there. I think very often about this quote. I think I quoted actually in the book. There was this famous line from Judge Alex Kaczynski of the Ninth Circuit, going back to this firearms case out of California back in 2003. And he describes the Second Amendment as a doomsday provision, as one that you never know when it's going to be necessary there. And I think often about that, Hugh, in the context of October 7th. I mean, I've been to those kibbutzim, those small communities there in the Gaza envelope. You know, what if Kibbutz Be'eri, what if Kfar Aza, what if these tiny communities actually had firearms? What if they knew what they were talking about? What if they took the opening line of Psalms chapter 144, that you shall train my fingers for war? What if they actually took this seriously? And it's not necessarily the civilians' fault. The Israeli government has been far too restrictive, frankly, when it comes to firearm ownership. But there has been a bit of a sea change there. Itamar Ben-Gvir has been very much pushing the envelope when it comes to trying to get more firearms in the hands of more Israelis there. And I applaud that as an American, as a Jew, as a constitutional, as someone who carries his own firearm, myself, every day, and that's someone who very much values.
You point out you learned it. Was it the University of Chicago prompted you to get that, or when you moved to Texas? What was the prompt for you to go from non-gun owner to a concealed carry guy?
Well, I lived in a lot of blue jurisdictions. I grew up in New York State. I lived in Washington, D.C. As you mentioned, I went to law school in Chicago. So I didn't have a whole lot of opportunities there. But after I graduated law school and moved to Texas, and I chose to move initially to Texas, largely because it is a red state. It was a very simple reason when it comes to all that entails culturally, economically, and so forth there. I immediately wanted to take advantage. And even before my first law firm job started there in Houston, Texas, I immediately had gone out and gotten my concealed carry license there. I already had purchased my first rifle. It's the same Daniel Defense M4 that I still own today. I actually call that my Warsaw Ghetto gun, because to me, that's the exact kind of weapon that the Jews of the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising would have loved to have had against the Nazis. Who knows what might have happened, of course, there. So I'm very passionate about this. I've written about this numerous times over the years. I truly wish that more Jews, more Americans in general, but maybe above all, I really do wish my fellow American Jews really would train with firearms and learn how to actually safely use and handle firearms.
Now, I want to compliment you on one thing. I've said for a long time, there are Christian Zionists who do not base their support of Israel on the fact that Jesus is a Jew or that the Torah is part of my scripture. No. I base it on the fact that Israel is a strategic ally of the United States that has nukes, that has our back, that we can count on, and is an economic engine of innovation. But not a lot of American Jews, and certainly not Israeli Jews, speak to the Gentile audience in America. I think a lot of Israel and civilization is directed at my team, my people, like I had on Douglas Murray this week, who does a lot of the same thing. But he's a Gentile talking to Gentiles about Israel. You're a Jew talking to Gentiles about it. There's a lot in here for American Jews, but do you agree or disagree with me that American Jews tend to overlook the fact they got to talk to the Gentile audience a lot?
Hugh, you've hit the nail on the head. I mean, one audience for this book is definitely my fellow Jews. The entire penultimate chapter, which is called the Maccabean Imperative, is really written directly to my fellow Jews, basically calling on Jews to actually be, as the book of Isaiah calls us to do, to be a light unto the nations, to actually observe the commandments, to own firearms, things like that there. But if there's one audience above all for this book, Hugh, it is Christians in America, because I see what's out there when it comes to trend lines, and thank God the fact that most Christians in America still remain overwhelmingly philo-Semitic, overwhelmingly supportive of Israel, especially evangelical Protestants and traditionalist Catholics there. But the polls are shifting a little bit. I'm sure you've seen them. The younger generation of Christians, not necessarily as reliably over the top pro-Israel as, for instance, the 1970s era moral majority, Jerry Falwell, people like that there. And I worry when I look at certain provocateurs out there. I worry about people like Candace Owens, Dan Bilzerian, and frankly, if I'm just being candid here, Tucker Carlson. I actually do worry about certain younger Christians being influenced by people who I view as trying to drive a wedge, trying to drive a chasm between the original people of the book, the original recipients of God's word, and the original disseminators of monotheism, and the people, the Christians, who actually built Western civilization off of that biblical foundation there. And we have to stand shoulder to shoulder, Hugh. That is the argument in this book. The argument is fundamentally calling for a Jewish-Christian nationalist alliance to double down on our shared joint biblical inheritance. You know, Hugh, I'm an observant Jew. I don't have a whole lot of opportunities to actually pick up and hold a physical Christian Holy Bible, but I was actually in a library maybe about a month and a half, 2 months ago, and I did exactly that, and I was thumbing through. And to your point, if I'm not mistaken, it looks to me like what Christians call the Old Testament, what we call Tanakh, the Hebrew Bible, is actually more than half of the Christian Bible. I think it's actually more pages. It's
it's 75%. Oh, yeah, it's 70 to 75%. But let's pause for a moment, Josh. One of my two areas of contention with you, I don't think Tucker belongs in the category with Candace and the other people. I think he actually did me a favor. I didn't know that Daryl Cooper guy was out there. I didn't even know we had a nut running around. Then he pops up on Rogan. So you can argue that Tucker's platform should not be open to the crazy anti-Semitic fringe, but he may not have known that he was a crazy anti-Semitic fringer, but I sure do now because of that. Candace on the other side and the other people who I do not know of, they're news to me. I read the names. Who are these people? Maybe I'm too old and too removed from the newest of new media. It's unnecessary to divide your friends. And my second example of that is Paul Ryan. And I want to give you the intellectual challenge. On page 38, you lay out the 7 Noahide laws. And you say, these are the 7 pillars of everything. And I agree. But later on, you blast Paul Ryan for asserting that there are universal values. How do you reconcile the fact that on page 38, there are these 7 laws that are the foundation of everything, and then you get forward to Paul Ryan who's talking about universal values and you don't like that?
A wonderful question. So I do place a very strong premium on the Noahide laws. Those are the 7 laws that apply not just to Jews, but to all of humanity there. Mostly common sense stuff, that thou shalt not murder, thou shalt not eat an animal in the live flesh without cooking it, and so forth there. Hugh, to me, there's a big distinction between believing in a notion of universal values, at least a universal baseline. Again, we're talking here about just 7 very kind of baseline laws there. But there's a big difference to me between believing in it and then believing in a conception of America's role on the world stage that seeks to spread by force, if need be, that conception to other lands there. That to me is really what's actually doing the work. I think a lot about this quote from John Quincy Adams that he gave before he was president, back when he was Secretary of State to President Monroe, and he gave this very famous speech. I'm sure you, as a very well-educated guy, that you will be familiar with it, where he says, "America does not go abroad in search of monsters to destroy. We wish everyone our own, but we are ultimately the safeguarders, the protectors of liberty."
I saw you quote that, Josh, and I immediately wrote down. I put notes in the back of the book when I'm getting ready. There is no abroad anymore. That's the difference. And when W orders the invasion of Iraq, it's not neocon. It's because he genuinely believed they had WMD and were dangerous. I wish he'd kept going to Syria and Tehran. A lot more people would be alive today, but he didn't. The fact that Adams doesn't fit in this is because there is no abroad with hypersonic missiles. All right, pause right there. I will continue talking with Josh. Don't go anywhere. I'll put it all over on YouTube. This book, Israel and Civilization, ought to be on every shelf. Whether you're Jewish or Christian, if you care about Israel, you want to read it. I'm standing by for Bethany Mandel. We'll track her down. Before that, though, I want to play for you Secretary of State Marco Rubio at today's cabinet meeting, talking about the big picture of the big picture, cut number 8.
Well, Mr. President, one of the most important things I believe you'll achieve in your presidency is reordering the world in a proper way. For 31 years, more than 31 years now, multiple administrations have allowed the Chinese to deindustrialize this country, to take away jobs and factories and pillars of our national strength. And what you're doing now, I think, is a great service to our country, but ultimately to the world. And I want to congratulate you and your team that's working on that, because it has extraordinary geopolitical implications, as you see from all these other countries that are now coming here and wanting to join something that actually makes it's crazy to allow these. I mean, basically, we lived in a world where Chinese companies can do whatever they want in America, but our companies cannot do anything over there unless they allow it. And even
it's really all about China. I'm joined now by Bethany Mandel, whose Substack is at Bethany Shondark. So you got to go and Google Bethany Shondark and Mom's War, and you'll go there. You know, Bethany, I didn't know how it worked, and I finally figured it out today. You just go over there and give me your email, and then they can go read Bethany Mandel, Bethany Shondark, but they got to find Mom's War.
So it's actually themomwars.substack.com. I saw that you subscribed to my personal one, that I never use it. It's themomwars.substack.com.
So I did it wrong.
You did it wrong.
I always do it wrong.
A lot of people do it wrong. So
The Mom Wars. Mom is singular or plural?
Singular. The Mom Wars.
Mom Wars. .substack.com. All right, Bethany, I've got 2 questions for you. You're a homeschooling mother of 6. Next week is the 250th anniversary of the shot heard around the world. Will the Mandel children know what that is?
Does the Mandel mom know what that is? So the answer is probably no.
The shot heard around the world is the Battle of Lexington and Concord, Paul Revere's ride.
Oh, yeah. I just don't know that word. Yes. We've gone
You don't know shot heard around the world? That is a poem, I think, by Longfellow. I'll look it up, but it's the shot heard around the world is when the battle broke out at Lexington and Concord.
I've actually read that whole poem in its entirety, and my oldest daughter memorized it, and yet I drew a blank.
Bravo for her. Number 2, I am shocked. You are a Williamsburg fanatic, and I understand we all have our fetishes, and yours is Williamsburg, but they're not doing a reenactment. They're not doing anything on Patriots Day, April 19th. Not a thing.
So Williamsburg is, they've gone a little to the woke, a little.
Oh, really?
Sometimes they
How
send
can you
me
go
stuff
woke
and
if
I'm
you're
like,
in the 18th century?
I know. It's just, Mount Vernon is doing this a little bit too. And I have like employee friends at Mount Vernon who leak me stuff. There's stuff that happens. I mean, there's a Washington Examiner piece. I want to say it was, I don't remember who wrote it, but there was an incredible Washington Examiner magazine piece about how one of the other presidential libraries just went completely off the deep end. But all of these historical places have issues.
Well, I would like everyone to celebrate the beginning of our 250th anniversary, which will culminate next July 4th. But the Battle of Lexington and Concord really kicked it off 250 years ago. We're also coming up this month on the 50th anniversary of the fall of Saigon. Now, obviously, that happens before you're born, but I remember it quite clearly. I'm in college when that happens. Do you think any Americans will realize that between those 50 years ago and now, we haven't won anything. I mean, really won anything at all. We did Desert Storm, but we stopped. Then we got into Iraq. And in other words, we made a habit of losing wars or not winning wars.
Have you noticed that it feels like more often than not, our flag is at half-mast?
No.
Yeah.
Huh.
I pay attention. It's more frequent that it's at half-mast than it's not. I've been meaning to write a piece on this for 7 years. I noticed it because an Australian friend who was living here pointed it out to me. Why is your flag always at half-mast? I think it's the same mentality of loserness that has really infected our country in the last few decades. That it's
Expand
like
on
it's
loserness.
Loser
What do you mean by
mentality.
loserness?
It's a victimhood mentality. We're always mourning something. We're not. I mean, especially as we're coming up on the 250th anniversary, I think it's instructive when we think about how we teach history. It's a lot of victimhood mentality instead of like a bellicose patriotism that used to exist. We used to have that. And now we're focusing on way too much negative in sort of our national civic discourse.
All right. I am always interested in being as positive as I can be about whatever has happened, whether it's a Democrat or Republican. The last week was a wild ride with President Trump's trade war. Here's the best way to take the best explanation. America is the rich relative to the world. From 1945 on, we were the only free country economy that was giant. After the Soviet Union fell, we continue to be the rich relative that bailed everyone out, even though they weren't doing anything. Now China's there, and we got to get everybody on the same team and realizing they're our enemy. Israel is our friend. NATO should be our friend. The UK is our friend. Canada should not be so belligerent. But I think Donald Trump was doing a throwdown this week. What do you think?
It felt like a game of chicken in a negotiation that we were all sort of on an episode of The Apprentice, but it was like international economy Apprentice. I, for my own mental health, mostly checked out. I sort of looked at the stock market and was like, I'm not going to check any of my accounts and I'm just going to trust that it all works out. And it seems
You're so young,
okay.
you should never look at your account. Now, I've done this 6 times. I've had 6 market panics now, and I tell my kid, don't ever sell into a panic. I want to thank you for introducing me to Gotti.
Actually, I bought it.
That's it.
Stock.
That's good. Thank you for turning me on to Gotti Taub. That was an amazing interview. I also want to recommend to you Israel and Civilization by Josh Hammer and Douglas Murray's On Democracies and Death Cults, the subtitle of which is Israel and the Future of Civilization. Notice any, correspondence between Israel and the future of civilization? What do you think?
Those are both, so it's Passover starting on Friday night, and those are both on my to read pile that I purchased and I didn't get a review copy, I just want to say.
Oh,
that's how much I'm excited to read them.
Well, are you allowed to read on Passover? I know nothing about it. I know you have to clean the house, right?
You can't use a Kindle, but I mean, I went through a book and a half on Shabbat last week. It's the best time to read.
What do the kids do when you're reading? Yeah, that's kind of a luxury. Oh, I got one more important question. Fluoride in the water. Are you for it or against it?
So funny that you say that because I was just listening to the commentary podcast where John was livid about it.
Yes.
I'm a little red-pilled about it. I was
listening
I'm not.
To... Oh, goodness. You don't remember what dentist offices were like before they put fluoride in the water.
I went to the dentist the other day and I have no teeth left. It's all fillings, all in here.
Well,
I think that I'm in favor of RFK investigating. Let's see how that goes.
I'm not. But that's why we have Bethany on, and that's why you should go and subscribe at The Mom Wars, single mom, plural wars, themomwars.substack.com, which I'm going to do right now. We will get you details on the crash of the helicopter into the Hudson. I believe 5 or 6 people are believed dead. Very disturbing video out there. We haven't got the rights to it, so I'm not going to play it on the Salem News Channel without knowing that I can, but we're aware of it. We'll bring you updates as it happened. At the cabinet meeting today, every cabinet, it was like show and tell. And Pam Bondi Gosh, she's going to be a great attorney general. Cut number 5.
President, we've had some great wins in the last few days. That you were overwhelmingly elected by the biggest majority. The U.S. Americans want you to be president because of your agenda, and the courts are ruling that you have the authority to determine how the money of this country will be spent. That's what the American citizens wanted, and that's what they're getting. An example of that Friday was the Department of Education, that you can determine how the money will be spent. No more DEI, and that impacts every agency across the board. On the civil side, again, NLRB. We had a big win in the Supreme Court there. OPM, a big win there. But also 16,000 workers there. But also on the criminal side, the Alien Enemies Act. We are winning there. And, your directive to me was to keep America safe, and that's what we're doing. Whether it's the alien enemies, all of these gangs, and they are enemies of our country. They are terrorists. They are organized crime. They have come here. They are extremely organized. They are spread throughout our country, and they are creating terror. And no more under your directive. And that is stopped. Yesterday in South Florida, we charged the 11 defendants with $500 million of pure cocaine coming into our country to kill our kids. They were caught. They will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. These gang members are going back to where they came, or they're going to an El Salvador prison at your
Thank you, Pam
directive.
Bondi. That's
And,
what I want to
you
hear. I'm also very glad that Scott Bessent is our Secretary of the Treasury. Cut number 7, Scott Bessent at the Cabinet.
I'd echo what Howard said on the trade queue, that we've got over 75 countries that want to come in. So it'll be Treasury, Commerce, Jameson at USTR, and we're putting a process in place. And as you said, you're going to be part of the negotiations too, because I've had these countries call me up and the Secretary Bessent, we're happy you're going to be negotiating. I said, well, President Trump's going to be involved too. So bring your best deal. On the budget, it's moving quickly in the House and the Senate, thanks to your leadership. We're also going to have debt ceiling in there, so we're going to get an increase in the debt ceiling. And that will be the done and dusted for.
Part of the bill that we just got to vote on today.
Part of the bill. It'll be done and dusted for 2 years. We won't have to worry about that. And then I gave a speech yesterday to 1,400 small and community bankers, and they were so happy to hear from your administration. And I told them Wall Street's done great for the past 4 years, 10 years, 20 years. It can continue doing great, but it's Main Street's turn now, and it's those small bankers through deregulation, through emphasis on Main Street, your Main Street agenda, bringing back jobs, that is going to power the smaller communities. And then finally, the bond auction went very well yesterday. We had a lot of foreigners show up as the support, showing that the U.S. is still the best place to invest. The inflation report, as you said, was quite good. And energy prices are down more than 20%.
That's the inflation answer. And then let's make sure we hear from Elon Musk, who's also at the Cabinet meeting today, giving a report on Doge. Cut number 13.
Thanks to your fantastic leadership, this amazing cabinet, and the very talented Doge team, I'm excited to announce that we anticipate savings in FY26 from reduction of waste and fraud by $150 billion. And and some of it is just absurd, like people getting unemployment insurance who haven't been born yet. I mean, I think anyone can appreciate whether, I mean, come on, that's just crazy. Some of these things, people ask me, like, well, how are you going to find waste and fraud in the government? I'm like, well, actually just go in any direction. That's how you find it. It's very common.
That is
it's as a military
damning indictment, isn't it? Just go in any direction and you will find waste and fraud. Don't go anywhere. Senator Jim Talent used to represent Missouri. I had Senator Schmidt, who represents Missouri now, on with me earlier today. But I want to talk to Jim Talent about the shipbuilding executive order that came out last night. Very, very detailed. I see some hands. I see the hand of some friends in that executive order, and I'm very, very excited to go over it with Jim Talent. Look, it's a goal. It's going to take a while, but we've got to get going to get there. Joined by United States Senator Jim Talent, formerly Senator Talent. Now he is just Jim Talent, head of the Reagan Institute Leadership Program. Jim, I hope you saw the executive order that rolled out last night on shipbuilding. Have you had a chance to review it? Yet it's very long, very detailed.
Yeah, a number of different sections in it, Hugh. I have read it. It's the kind of thing I'm going to go back and take notes about. It's a whole of government. First of all, the emphasis is on maritime shipbuilding and the ship business, which is really good because we can't rebuild the Navy if we don't rebuild shipbuilding in general. A whole of government approach, transportation, commerce, defense. It's going to be worked through the interagency and coordinated through the interagency. They're already doing that. There's a number of different financing mechanisms built in, and including directions to prepare legislation to ask the Congress to pass, which I was very pleased about. And I think there's a good chance we can get, because there's bipartisan support in the Congress to rebuild American shipbuilding. So, and this is not the end. We're going to see, I think, more executive orders, more action coming, and it wouldn't surprise me to see it come pretty quickly with greater detail on naval shipbuilding in particular.
Now, Senator, the story I read today is on the frigate that is being built in Green Bay, Wisconsin. And it was a fine ship when I toured it, and it was the Italian version. And it's way behind. It threatens to become the new LCS. I don't think it will be. I know the guy who runs the shipyard. But the Navy has to make up its mind what it wants. I mean, this is not a new problem with the Navy changing the specs. When are they ever going to learn?
Yes. Yes, and I have to say, a lot of the blame for that lies with the Biden administration and their civilian appointees, who I like personally. I thought they were fine people, and Secretary Del Toro was a patriot, former Navy ship commander. But you have the civilian people have to make the decisions. For example, about requirements. That ship should have been built to be an offensive ship. They shouldn't have worried that much about survivability. The idea is to get precision fires and ordnance onto the water and into Indo-PACOM. It shouldn't have cost, in my opinion, when I looked at this for the Reagan campaign many years ago, maybe $500 million a copy. It's more than double. They could have taken the Italian design, made a few adjustments, but they didn't. They basically wanted to do their own design. And of course, that takes the Navy forever. So the underlying problem is structural. You have to have civilian appointees in the Secretary of Navy's office, the Secretary and the Under for Shipbuilding, who are willing to make decisions. I think we've got one now with Secretary Phelan. He's been confirmed. He's a business guy who's used to moving quickly, and I think he's going to do that.
Right now, the next thing that comes up, Gretchen Whitmer was in the Oval yesterday. I said, what is she doing there? And that was before I saw the EO. And then I realized we have the Great Lakes, and they can build ships on the Great Lakes that we need. All right, they're interior, and there's only one shipyard, as far as I know. It's up in Green Bay. Are there other opportunities, to your knowledge, along the lake, particularly along Ohio's lakefront?
Yeah, absolutely. And remember, when we talk about shipbuilding, we're not necessarily just talking about building ships. We're also talking about manufacturing the parts for ships, warehousing the parts for ships. The whole Great Lakes region is located. It's very favorably located in terms of its relationship to our biggest shipyards. There's a lot of labor there that right now is not working because of the collapse in manufacturing employment that the tariffs are intended to address. And so there's a lot of advantages here. And I know for a fact, that the people studying this in the National Security Council are surveying the various smaller shipyards around the country, thinking how they can be refitted to be part of the plan for naval shipbuilding, because they believe, and I certainly hope, that there's going to be more than enough money to fund all the business that the big shipyards can do.
Now, I want to close by going back to an interview I did early in the program with Congressman Van Orden, who has had it with the Freedom Caucus. And he said, they're nice people, but they cannot do this. Now, the budget passed, but there was drama and there was phone calls from President Trump. And what Van Orden said is that people who need phone calls from Donald Trump, it's not the way we need to do things. What do you think? Do you think that the Freedom Caucus will be part of the solution or part of the problem over the next 3 months when reconciliation? Now the budget's done. Reconciliation kicks in. You've been in the House. You've been in the Senate. Can we get the tax bill done?
Right. I think so. And I actually was very pleased with how this functioned. And I'm going to give you a little bit of a contrary point of view here, because the opposition at the end was not just people looking for headlines. It was people like Chip Roy, who had staked out a position for a long time in favor of cutting spending. And they're right in wanting to cut spending. The House bill was much stronger in that respect. These people suspect, and with good reason, that the Senate is going to try and get off without having any real spending cuts. And by putting up this resistance and making the leadership go the extra mile, I think they have strengthened Speaker Johnson's hand in eventual conference committees to say to the Senate, look, I promised these people that we were going to have some real budgetary restraint here. We have to put this in. So I think this may work out very well. I would have been upset if they had had to wait until next week to do this, but really what they did, they made him wait an extra day. And so I think this was pretty responsible.
I'm glad that they put their weapons down and came to the table, because reconciliation is what matters to me. Let me talk to you about the defense part of that. There's $150 billion in the Senate bill that was passed for the defense business. Who does Armed Services get to allocate that in the Senate? I know Susan Collins told me yesterday it's not a probes.
Well, it's both. So the Senate will, the authorizing committee, which is the Senate and House Armed Services Committee, they will authorize expenditures in particular areas, and then the Appropriations Committee will make the actual funding decisions. So it's both, and Susan's going to have a lot of control over it. But the specific decisions will be made by the appropriators within the limits and for the purposes set by the authorizing committee. That's why there's a problem when the authorizers are not able to move quickly, because the appropriators don't have the directions they need.
Let's hope the authorizers get very specific about what the Navy and shipbuilding has to do to keep this EO momentum going. Jim Talent can be followed on X at Jim Talent, the easiest X account in the world to follow and one of the smartest. By all means, do that. I want to get one more bite from the cabinet meeting today. This is the trade rep, Jamison Greer, who did such a good job on the Hill this week. Cut number 12.
You've been keeping us very busy. Last week, you started a reordering of international trade, something that hasn't happened for 80 years, something that should have happened decades ago. And you know that. You've known that for a long time. That's why you have us all working on this. You came into an emergency situation where President Biden left us with a $1.2 trillion trade deficit. It's the largest of any country in human history. The largest. So you declared an emergency. You took action.
You say the largest in history, right?
In history.
There's never been anything like what he left us. He left us a mess. His whole administration was a mess. So go ahead.
So
all right, that's enough for me. I just like that part. His whole administration was a mess. Well, that's what you have when you have a physically infirm and then increasingly cognitively impaired president. Everyone did what was right in their own eyes. If that sounds familiar, it's an echo from Scripture. Not a good thing. When you haven't got a hand on the tiller that actually knows where they want to go or what they want to do besides spend money, you don't end up with anything except inflation. I enjoyed that today. I think I've played a little bit of everyone, maybe not. There's some people I might not gotten to, but I like it when they have these get-togethers and they talk about what they're doing. I think that's actually great for the country. I also know that Relief Factor is great for you. It's great for me. I went up the Implacable Hill. I actually trundled up the Implacable Hill today. I got my 6 miles in. Tomorrow's an off day. Saturday's the long trundle. And here's the deal. It's taken me all winter to get back to this so that I can do the 6 in the morning before the program. And Relief Factor, I've taken it all through, but I was sick for a month. Thank you, Genghis Kate. And I'm better, and now I'm catching up on the miles. And you expect to actually hurt and ache a little bit if you haven't been doing what you normally do. But I don't, and I credit Relief Factor. I carry an curcumin, resveratrol, omega. It's the only supplement I've taken for 20 years, and I've been taking it for 10. And I would recommend it to anyone because those are the 4 natural ingredients that support your body's anti-inflammatory system. Great science, good manufacturing, superb product. It is a wonderful thing to treat yourself to. The starter pack is $19.95. $19.95, less than $1 a day for 3 weeks. Just try it. If you're moping around and your aches and your pains are taking up too much of your attention, then get yourself Relief Factor by calling 1-800, the number 4 and the word relief, or go to relieffactor.com, relieffactor.com. By tomorrow, I will have finished the last episode of 1923, and I'll be able to tell you, it got very Western, but the last episode was like 3 episodes, so it's taken us a long time to go. I really am not much for TV beyond an hour, streaming or not. It's very good. I don't know who's going to be standing at the end of it, because it got very Western, to quote Chuck Box. But I'll tell you about it tomorrow.